Hey guys, it's Jeff here from RenoVision DIY, and today we are here to show you guys how to install what I think is the sexiest DIY countertop for your kitchen. That's right, we're talking butcher block. We're going to show you how to not just install this, but we're going to show you how to bind it, mend it, finish it, and the pièce de résistance, we're going to do a waterfall countertop to the floor. Now when you go shopping for your butcher block countertops, there are a few different woods, there's different base colors, there are also different sizes. You can go 6, 8, 10, 12 feet. Just make sure that you line up your measuring with your product based on availability and your ability to get it delivered. I found out the hard way that I bought a 12-footer and they wouldn't deliver it to my house. So I actually had to rent a truck with a great big bed to go and pick that sucker up, which affected the affordability issue. So in hindsight, it would have been better for me to buy 3 pieces instead of 2, because I've got an 8 and a 12. I'm going to chop it all down. So really the simple concept of countertops is this. They make the countertop to fit a standard size kitchen cabinet, and all kitchen cabinets are standard size. So it gets rid of a lot of the guesswork for you. You don't have to measure the thickness. They're always 24¼ or 24, give or take a hair, okay? So you're going to be fine because they make the countertops themselves to be 25 inches wide, so you're always going to have an overhang. Now you're already in business. All you got to do is measure the length and then cut it to fit. So I recommend you have a factory edge. Always measure from your factory edge, thinking I'm going to put that where it's exposed. Okay, and that means that all the cuts that you make are going to be covered by your backsplash that you're going to install later. And that is money in the bank. So here we go. We're going to take a measurement, and I'm exactly 42½ up to the stove, and I've got a nice little gap over here on the other side, so I'm going to be comfortable to install that stove later. So we're going to just jump right into this. We're going to cut a 42½ inch piece. Let me just double check my measurement. Yep, 42½ inch piece, and then we're going to show you how to use the mending plates, glue it all together, and install it so it's secure. All right guys, now here, countertop comes with a protective coating. Plastic sheet. You're going to want to get that out of the way. What I've done is I've actually set it on 3/4 inch block so that I have an airspace underneath. And this way I've got 2 blocks here, 2 blocks there. When I cut this, nothing's going to fall. I'm not going to bind my saw, which is going to be fantastic. Here we go, 42½. We're going to mark this. Remember, the cut line goes up against the back wall. No one's ever going to see it. We don't need any fancy track saws. We don't need clamps. We don't need anything else. Just put a couple of marks in your pencil. Draw a line. Follow that all the way off. Here we go. Now the only other thing we got to know is the thickness. Slab is 1.5 inches thick, okay? But I'm going to set this at 1.75 inches. That way it'll cut all the way through, and I'm not at risk of damaging my floor. Voila. There's our first piece of counter. And it's as simple as setting it in place, you'd think, right? Well, one more thing we gotta do. This is what we're gonna call the underside. And just so that we don't get confused, put a big U on it, okay? We're already at that place we wanna introduce the mending plate. Now mending plates are awesome. This is Simpson strong tie steel. This is for doing structural work, all right? Now I was in the furniture business at one point for a little while, and we used mending plates all the time when we were attaching office desks. And basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna take advantage of this little space here where this countertop goes. We're gonna attach the mending plate on the underside, right near the edge, okay? And then when we're gonna flip it and install it, when we get the next cut, we can install it. We can add glue on the joint, go underneath, and then screw those mending plates, tighten the whole frame up together. We're going to show you how to do that, get a professional look. We're looking here 1.5 to 22.5. That is my space. I give myself some markers, and I want to do the 2 mending plates. Okay, here we go. Now I have 1 inch to spare underneath there. I do not want to have this metal coming in contact with this framing. Okay, so I've already done the measuring. My countertops are 25 inches wide. I have 1 inch of extra space. So as long as we do it this way, we're going to be just fine. Now, I want to pre-drill my hole with a tiny bit. I've got 1 inch screws. I have 1.5 inch surface. And I have a thread here on that bit. It's only 3/4, and that's fine. We're going to just do a little pre-drilling. Hardwood, if you don't pre-drill, is just going to split. Okay. Now, obviously we don't need all of these holes. This mending plate is extremely large and extremely strong. But what I did learn in my years of doing furniture work is since a mending plate isn't going to be where you have any framing, the stronger the steel you use, the better. Okay. Yeah, see, screws have a shear strength of around 60 to 80 pounds. And it's really hard to figure out that sweet spot. There we go. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. All right, now we've got this countertop ready to roll. Let's just stick it in place. We'll measure and cut the next one. All right, here we go. You can see why it's necessary to install this in sections and don't pre-assemble. All right, now, like in every world, no square is perfectly cornered. That's nice and tight on both sides. I got a gap over here. I got a little bit of a gap over here forming. It's not going to matter, because let's just talk about the end game so that you don't get intimidated with this. I'll show you something. I'm picking these products for a reason, because the tile is thick enough to cover almost every gap. Okay? See that? With a little bit of cement, even this big gap is covered. It's going to look amazing. All right? And that's why we use this. When you're doing a DIY project, consider how out of square your house might be, and recognize that sometimes a thicker tile on the wall is the solution to the problem. Instead of trying to scribe the back wall to be perfectly square, driving yourself nuts, it's easier for me to cut this next piece, stick it in, and if the wall isn't straight, just make this seam perfect, and then fill that gap with a proper tile job. So now what we want to do, because we have 8.5 feet left over, it's enough to fill all the way from here to here. Now this is our sink location. We'll cut that out later, but today we just want to get this install done. And check this out. We are looking at 97 3/8, and then we're going to measure again up here where that 1 inch overhang is. 97 1/4. Okay? Now, we are going to take the shortest of those two distances, 97 1/4, and we're going to cut the whole slab that way, knowing that the gap in that back corner is going to be eliminated by the tile work. 97 1/4. There we go. Time for me to buy a new square, because it is out of square. How about that? So there's my mark. Okay. Whew. All right, so this is a huge slab, and I've got to be able to attach the mending plate and then roll it over, so it's easier to just do it right here on the floor. And again, the mending plate is going against that edge, and we have everywhere from 2 to 22 inches to play with. We also don't have any framing in the neighborhood. So we have the luxury of going a little bit more evenly split this time. And when you can go half and half, just do it. It makes more sense. So I'm going to put in my screws in a different rotation this time. Here I'm going to go there, there, something more like this, okay? With 5. Okay. Wait a minute. That's the wrong side. Oh my goodness, Jeff. The island is going this way. That's the back side. I have from 2, that happens. 22. There we are again. Same thing, only different. Okay. Okay, just a warning. These are really heavy, okay? You might want to have 2 people help navigate this. Ay, ay, ay. I know it's not granite, but it ain't far from granite, if you know what I mean. Okay. This is, yeah, this is gonna be a pain in the ass. So the plan here is really kind of simple. I have to lift the counter. I'm gonna take my scrap block underneath to brace this so that the edge of this was exposed on this side, and then the other edge is exposed from underneath that I can get under the cabinet. I wanna glue both sides, all right? So that when I set them together, I get a really good bond. And try not to pinch off any of my fingers today, like I did the other day. That was a bad day. Okay, there we go. We've got access for the glue. Let's just take advantage of our scrap tile, get this started. Okay, now, we don't want to have so much glue go on here that when I go underneath, it's raining glue all over my face. So we're going to try to do just 1 bead. Here we are. And then I'm going to just try to finger that in like so. Okay, I'm going to do the same from the underside. Here we are. Here we are. Okay, I think that's got it. All right, yeah, delicious. Okay, how many, does this make you feel like you're in kindergarten again? Wood glue. Now we're gonna lift, all right, and set it. Okay, now, instead of trying to drag this countertop over, we're going to go like this, where we know we have framing, and wedge this over. All right, now it doesn't have to be perfect right now. It will be in a minute. Now I'm going to go underneath, and I've got a mending plate with a big hole, and I'm going to put the screw tip, the very tip, right on the edge. I'm going to pre-drill right at the edge of that hole. And then when the thickness of the shaft of that screw hits that, it's going to pull the plate over and it's going to slide that piece nice and tight, in theory. So let's see if this works out. Boy, I'm ever glad I lost some weight. So here we are. And we're gonna just look for one screw here and one screw at the other end just to get this lock done. Here we are, right on the edge. Okay, and then back here. Alrighty. I got myself a few screws handy. Oh, my back. I was actually laying on a screw. What in the hell is going on here? How do I get that to fix? I have got to get a shim of some sort in here. Okay, so you see how the glue squeezed out? That actually worked. But this counter seems to have a bow in it. The long one. Let me get that nice and tight. There it is there. Okay, needs a little bit more support right on the seam. I'm going to leave that in there while it's drying. Unfortunately, because it's wood, this particular countertop has a little bit of a bend to it. Sometimes that's material shipping, handling, storage, whatever. So there's going to be a bit of an oddity here with this edge. So what I am going to do is I'm going to fill all this up with some glue. There's going to be some sanding involved with getting this finished. All right, it's not the end of the world. So let's just, we'll get sure we get a nice seal here, rub that all in. Once all that's dry, we'll be able to polish it down and buff it out. Let's just put on the brakes for a second. I have an 8-foot piece of countertop left. I have a almost 3-foot piece. I have a 3-foot piece, and I have this piece, which means I'm going to employ a system that I use. Always go with the longest piece first, and then if you make a mistake, you can then use that for another piece, right? I have enough work here that if I screw up the cut for my waterfall on my miter, I can actually square end it and stick it over there. So I get 2 shots at this. I almost went and cut that and gave myself no mercy. Now, here's the cool thing. This existing countertop is also 1.5 inch, which means I've already got the point for my waterfall to measure to. So before I remove this, you thought I was just another pretty face, eh? Here we go. 35.5. And what are the odds? Of course it's not the same. Really, like 35 1/8, 35.5. Okay. Here's one of these situations where what you want to do is, because this is going to be flat and this is mitered, this will then travel with a perfect 45-degree cut, and then you have to scribe where it hits the floor, okay? And we can do that. So we're going to take the longest measurement, cut the block, put on our miter, then we'll scribe the base. Probably a good idea for me to have 2 shots at this. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is take a total measurements of all 3 pieces that we need, so we can find out what our mercy is. I got 35.5. I've got 16.5. And what is this? 32 and 34.5. 60, 69, 70, 86.5. Okay. So we have 11.5 inches in mercy. So wisdom would say we cut the slab, the long length, just a little bit longer than we need. Then we can put it up on a table, and then we can actually cut the miter, all right? Instead of trying to cut that on the floor. So let's do that. So the first one is going to be 35.5. We'll cut it at 36.5. Then we'll do the miter. Then we'll then we'll do the miter, and then we'll scribe it to the floor. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot what the word scribe was. That's awesome. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is take my square and check to see how flat is the countertop coming from the factory here. I want to know if there's any kind of a warp or anything then I have to duplicate that warp on both sides of the miter. It actually looks pretty good. So this should work out all right. And again, I'm going to mark this all underside, okay? So that we don't have any problems. Now, my measurement was 35.5, giving myself a little bit of mercy. So I'm going to measure off at 36.5, okay? There we go. And because this is what I'm keeping, I'm going to stay to this to the left of the line. Alrighty. So here we go. That's my first miter piece. All right. Here we go. This is the underside. So, one more thing we've got to check. We're going to put this on 45 degrees here. And it's going to cut all the way through. Yes, it goes to 2 inches of depth. We're going to be fine. Now, one other thing I have to do is I'm going to just put a bit of a cut line on here. Measure off where my plate is. Now I got a measurement of exactly how far back from my finish line I'm going to be attaching a piece of material with clamps as a straight edge. And that is an obscure weird number of 4 3/4. Okay. So, 4 3/4. Now we want to measure 35.5. 35.5. Okay. Let's just do the math. It might be easier. And minus 4 3/4 makes it 31.5. Makes it 30 3/4. Go the other way. 34, 35.5, 30 3/4. And we'll measure to 30 3/4. That'll be more exact. Okay. All right. Now we need clamps. Got to focus on keeping this plate tight up against my material. Okay, and that's the only thing I can focus on. Everything else has no business being entered into my mind. Why is it wandering all over the damn place? Blade is bloody well wandering. It's also getting really hot. We're gonna stop. I'm gonna go and buy a brand new blade. This is a lot of wear and a lot of heat, and I don't have enough teeth on this blade. The blade is wandering. So that means that everything else is moving in one direction, but the blade is starting to go like this and is warping under the heat. So I've got to go and get a finer tooth blade that is able to cut this a lot cleaner and not create so much heat. All right, I will be back in a few minutes. Okay, so I went shopping and got myself this. This is what we call a ultra finish 60 tooth blade. You can see the difference in the two blades right out of the gate. Now, my bad, right? I have enough experience in these things, I should have known better. But it's just part of the deal, right? Like when I'm working and talking to you guys and instructing and then doing the filming, I forget sometimes the basics, which is great because then I make mistakes that you can learn from because that's just the way the world works. So we're gonna go back to the beginning. We're gonna fix all of this up. I have to take my blade out and switch it up. We'll change this back out. Okay, so now we're back in business. Problem is, now that I've got this cut that's running crazy on me, no saw is going to start here and then cut a brand new line. There's an opportunity. It's easier to follow this curve now than it is to cut a new line, okay? So you know how I say Better to start with your longest cuts and then work your way down, because this cut is now not going to be going on that part of the counter. I'm going to use the other piece to cut this cut. This one's just going to be cut square off. We're going to salvage it and install it on the other side. So, I'm going to show you this. This is now the longest that my countertop can be right here. Okay? So, what I'm going to do, I know this was marked as the underside, but in this scenario, I don't have much of a choice. And we're going to cut this off and try to salvage as much of this top as we can. So, from the blade to the side of my plate, my measurement is 5 1/16. So, there it is. Okay? So now I'm going to get the measurement from the factory edge to here. 28 13/16. And we'll mark that here. That's about as precise as I can possibly be. Now we will clamp these two down and cut away. Let's do this. All right. Much better. Now, we don't have a whole lot of options here, so let's just get that in position. All right, it overhangs just a hair, which is not ideal. I would have rather had about another 1/2 inch or so, something closer to where the tile was going to finish, but you know what? Considering this is the only option I have for saving the countertop, I'm going to go with it. Yeah, maybe we'll take a look at getting a new fridge. Yeah, maybe. I'd rather buy a new fridge than buy a new countertop. Now, I'm not going to install this one because you can see it's got some work damage on the corners. I'm going to do some sanding on this first and then bring it back in position. Because really what I'm doing, I'm dying to see if that new blade will cut that 45. Because even straight, it had a bit of an issue. So we're going to cut the 45 first, right on the edge. And then if we have any difficulty, I'm going to switch out that blade and put it on the powered saw and not rely on a battery saw and see if that makes a difference. Well, here goes everything. This is either going to be monumentous or an absolute failure. Okay, let's do this. Nice and slow, we'll let the blade do all the work. Well, there we go. I didn't get any burning hardly at all that time. Fantastic. Okay. Now one thing that you want to consider is this. A 30-inch stove is a 30-inch stove and you want a 30-inch space. You don't want a 31, okay, with your countertop. So they might have gave you a little mercy with the cabinet, but the countertop you want to have pretty exact. So the stove is actually 30 inches. It's a 1/16 shy of that. Okay, so we pushed it all the way we can to that countertop. We're going to measure actual dimension here now to this point right here. This is the furthest point on the cabinet. This thing right here. That gets me 15 3/4. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a full 1/8 off of that. So I'm going to go 15 1/8. I mean, 15 5/8. Yes, okay. And we have the same measurement here, so 15 5/8, so that I end up a little short here. And the reason for that is, in the future, if somebody wants to, they can put in a different kind of stove that comes with an integrated flange on it, okay? And that actually allows you to set the height of the feet and then slide it over top of the countertops. That keeps you from getting debris and stuff falling down and making it filthy. It's a new innovation in stoves, and it would be lovely, but we're not going to do that on this particular project. We're just going to set it up for future success. Okay, so we're taking the 2 offcuts of the miter. We're gonna just see what is our finished countertop gonna look like. If I can create just a little bit of compression, that's almost perfect. That's something that we can sand into a nice, clean, rounded edge after it's glued together and get a really good look. That was so much easier and cleaner with it straight through. Let's just toss that right here. Again, here's my mitered edge. I want to line that up with the, that is a thing of beauty. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our measurement from this point to the floor in both locations. That'll allow us to transfer that actual dimension of contact with the floor to our slab that's already cut. So what we have to do before we move any further is make sure that this is level. Okay, and we are out. And we knew we were. So now it's time for some shims. We're going to start off with doing that, nice and simple. From 0 to hero, we're going to add that extra 1/16. See how much of a dramatic effect that makes. And I am way up in the air here. Okay, here we go. That is better. Wow. I love it when a plan comes together. That is perfect. Check that out. We got contact in both corners here. We got contact in both corners there. We're level. Now I can measure and get my number to the floor. Right off the front, which is 36 1/4. And I use the initial L on my measurement because it's somewhere between 36 1/4 and the next 1/16 of an inch. So you might think this is crazy, but we want to be as exact as we can be to make sure that this gap at the bottom doesn't require any quarter round when we're finished. And now this one is 36. Bam. I'm going to take that, transfer that line over to the other slab, and we'll cut that one, and then we'll see how this lines up. So I'm over there thinking to myself, why is it smaller on the back? We fixed the level. Right? That didn't make a lot of sense to me. So then I realized, wait a second, I'm standing here on the floor measuring, and then I just reach over and I measure. But this is a floating floor. So whenever you have floating floor, it's not fixed, and it can move up and down depending on what kind of situations it's dealing with. Now watch this. Let's get real close in on this, and we'll see how much this floor moves when I step on it. So here we go. Now let's go back up to the measurement of the countertop now that I have my weight there. Now I'm reading almost 36 1/4. That's pretty intense. Right? So in truth, the floor is actually much more parallel to the countertop than I thought. So I don't need to scribe it. What I needed to do was measure with the floor under weight. Remember that in the future when you're dealing with floating floors. They can be in 2 positions, right? Direct contact with the subfloor or not. Alrighty. Moment of truth. Do I need to buy another piece? Amazing. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on here. Yes, I'm a little tall. I get that. Okay, but look at the back wall. Look at my gap here. That's just ridiculous. That's how out of plumb this wall is. All right? And that's what I'm dealing with. I've got a couple options. I can cap this wood with a piece of painted stock. Okay? And I'm going to be left with a little gap, and that's fine. I can fix that with a piece of a little bit of shoe mold or corner mold. I can really overlap it and so that nobody can see past the gap, but that'll look stupid. The question is this tile thick enough to cover that gap once it's installed? And if it is, can I just pull this top piece of countertop out to make this work? That's taking a really big chance. So instead, one more cut. We're going to do a cut line down here and buy some extra space. It's just at the bottom where the most majority of this problem is. Okay, so I'm going to go from about here to the bottom. We'll take out that quarter. We'll be able to slide that in properly. And I also was correct in my original math. And I need to cut this bottom shorter another 1/8 of an inch. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, back to the drawing board. Now that gets us tight to the wall. That's much nicer. And I'm finding myself, I'm still running into this height issue. I'm a full 1/8, if not just a hair more. Okay, one more cut. Bloody well knew that was going to happen. So we got the right dimension, we got the right cut. And herein lies the problem with using wood. So we can't just drop this in and put it where we want to put it and just glue it because of the warp. We've got to eliminate the warp. So the height is perfect. The only way to eliminate a warp in wood is to screw it out. Yeah, that's not exactly what I wanted to hear today, is it? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a combination of the following. And this is going to be intense. I don't want it on the top, but I want the screws on the side because this is the one that's warped. This piece here also has a bit of a warp. So believe this or not, they're both the culprit. But I can deflect this one while I'm screwing this one in the middle, and then we can secure it with 2 more holes. So what we're going to do is mark off 3 locations where the wood is relatively blonde and doesn't have any grain. And so we're going to go 3/4 of an inch. That's a really big square, but we're going to go right about here. And like this one. And in the middle here. Okay? This is one of these moments where it's like, well, what is Jeff going to do to fix this mess, right? I have 2 pieces of wood, they're both bowed. I can't close that gap. It's not easy, so I went to the store and I bought myself some supplies. Now this is a piece of square steel, and it does not bend easy, where the countertop actually has some flex. So, and then I bought some clamps here. Let's get this open up to about 2.5 inches, give or take. We're going to clamp a piece of steel to the end here. Okay. And now you get to see, look at the gap that's showing up over here. Like I can slide my tool right underneath there. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing at the other end, and hopefully it flattens out. So the trick here is to buy steel that's stronger than the wood. Now the question is it flat? Or did the steel bend? So let's just, oh, I'm liking that. There's no more rock. Well, there's a little bit of rock. Okay, so the only other thing that we can do here to put even more pressure on it is to put a shim in the middle. All right, we're just going to keep engineering this until we get the kind of compression that we're looking for. Because until this works, I will not stop. Now, the metal can be free to bend as well. It's not going to make a difference because I'm going to expect that the wood is going to get flattened out under that much compression. We'll just keep on checking the countertop itself. There, perfectly flat. Okay, problem solved. We have to do the same to this side. Okay, because once we get them flat, we can glue it, line them up. Well, let's just go through this. This is a design feature. There's no real actual need to make a waterfall countertop, except that my wife thought that would be a really fun look. Now I'm starting to understand why people don't do it. But hey. Okay. Nice and simple. We'll get the shim in here. We'll get the same effect. Oh, hockey. Oh! Yeah, that sucks, eh? All right. So you see the gap? Okay, so when I tighten the clamp, because I have extra compression on the middle, it's going to close that gap and straighten it out. Okay, and if I over tighten, I can actually warp it in the other direction. Actually see just a hair of that happening. Okay, that's about as close to perfection as you're going to get. Okay, so now, and this is not the time to be cheap, we have the ability to do some sanding on this afterwards. Now, we also want to force glue up here. It's going to make a hell of a mess, I know it. It's okay. Glue is somewhat water soluble. There we go. Okay. Now, we're going to put this together. We're going to clamp the bar clamps together now. This looks a little almost prehistoric, right? I mean, one more thing that we're going to do here, because having that glue do the work of all this compression, it's not fair to ask that. I've got these 3 locations here that we're going to actually put screws. All right. Then we're going to take our 2-inch construction screws and we're going to drive those in, but before we do that, we are going to take a different drill bit and create a pocket hole for that screw to sit in. Okay, so we're going to use the existing hole, nestle the tip in there. That's it. Just bore out enough that we can get the screw head in there. Perfect. In that pre-drilled hole, the tip of this grabs it and keeps this hole centered. So now the screw will drive straight in. This bit's not 2 inches long and it is hardwood, so now I'm going to drive it in again and bury it one more time. That gives me that extra 1/4 inch, 3/8 of depth that I need. Whoa. Okay. Now, you can see that the screw that I'm using as a pilot, the threads of my screw are just a little bit wider. Okay, you should be able to see the threads of the screw show up on each side of that bit. And that's why we want to drive screws, because we need to close this gap permanently. Here we go. Okay. Once these screws are in, now this connection is going to be under the power of that thread, that compression. It's going to provide that strength so it doesn't crack over time. All right, there we go. Okay, that's step number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, one more thing we want to do here. Just getting the rough edge sanded down. Beautiful. I'm going to take my rag and I get it nice and wet. And I want to clean out the glue in that corner. Nice. And this is round 1. I'm going to do 2 rounds of this. Okay. And then tomorrow we'll be able to sand it all back. But this product, this stuff is amazing. It is, it's not a 2-part epoxy wood filler. It's a different kind of formulation. It's probably an acrylic. But the point is this. This product is smooth, clear. It can come in different wood tones. And we're just using it to fill. It doesn't shrink very much, but it will shrink on a hole like that. Okay? So, that's why I said we're going to use 2 applications. The other thing that this compound does is it'll hold a screw. It can be chiseled and sanded, all that kind of good stuff. So now what we do is we're going to use it like a putty. And we're going to fill up this little gap in the countertop. Because there's no amount of any work that you can do in advance. It's going to close up that countertop look to be perfect. So what we do is we use a little bit of this stuff. You know, and I'm not a professional woodworker, guys. I've just learned a few tricks over the years. If you've got better systems, by all means share it in the comment section. But I know that for the majority of my jobs, I can rely on this plastic wood product to solve my issues. And you got to see it to believe it, but that's fine. You'll see it in this video. When I come back and I do all the sanding to get rid of the pencil marks, I'll sand this in and it'll be unrecognizable. You won't even see it. Okay? So we stay natural with the product. We have a nice light wood. Okay? Plastic wood to the rescue. We're going to just scrape off the excess because that just removes a lot of work with the sander afterwards. Okay? So it dries really, really quickly. The sooner you get after tooling it, the better off you are. All right, there we go. Now our patient is in traction. But now the glue has got time under compression with the screws and the clamps to be able to really set up overnight. We'll take the assembly apart tomorrow. We'll stick it in place. We'll attach our countertops. We're going to shim them so they're all perfect, level, and flat. And then we're going to sand them. And we're going to take a tack cloth, clean it all up. And then we're going to put on our finish. And these countertops will be done. Cheers. Now it's been about 10 minutes. And just going to sand smooth the excess. And this is where you want to just close your eyes and you can feel the divot. This product sets up really quickly. Yep, there's still a ridge. It'll be the same. I've already put a second application, but I wanted to give you an idea how fast it sets up. There we go. Now, it's like anything. Even a non-shrinking formula shrinks a little bit. You have to be using almost nothing for it to not shrink. Or you apply it a little bit thicker like this, so it'll still shrink, and then you can sand it smooth. So on this coat, that's what I'm going to do. I'll leave a little bit more product on than I need, just to make sure that I don't want a fourth coat surprising me tomorrow when I go sand. Okay, there we go. Man, work with this stuff quick because it sets up really fast. right. Okay, well, here we go. Full disclosure, we did this 2 days ago, and I am petrified to undo all the clamps, but in theory, it's glued and screwed, and it's had 48 hours to set up. So, with any luck at all, we aren't going to have any cracks. And if we do, we will then re-screw all of this to the cabinet on both sides, and then filler the crack again, and hopefully that won't crack over time once it's rock solid in place. It's time to take the patient out of traction. Get those out of here. Yep, that happened. All right. See if we can maneuver this in place without damaging it. Okay, I'm liking that. It didn't crack. All right, well, I'm gonna sand it a couple inches off the wall just so I can get in here and get a nice clean edge. And then, that's gonna look pretty sexy. Yep, sir, nothing wrong with a sexy kitchen. All righty, and again, we'll start with the really loud, obnoxious noise. We'll start with some 40s. All right, one more and then we'll switch to the 80s. I need to use the coarse grit to get the pencil mark off. Because the texture of the wood is so bumpy, you can't get rid of that without going with a coarse grit. And kind of almost like miniature planer to get to that. Here we go. You can see over here, guys, we have a little bit of burning from the cutting process, and the stove only goes about halfway up the wood. So we want to make sure that we clean this up, and we'll use this as well. We'll use the 40 to get back to bare wood. Whew. All right, now we're going to go through the same process. We're going to do the 80, the 150, the 220, get it all finished up. All right. All right, so I know everybody's got the question, Jeff, what about these 3 screw holes that you patched? Nice and flush, but they're a little noticeable, you can tell, right? So what we do is we do a wet test. When you do the wet test, it simulates the oil, and then you see how visible or not they are. So we're just gonna go like this. Okay, now the wood is gonna go dark, and that's going to stay light. So the secret here is, I have to run to the store, and I have to go out and get just a little bit of stain. That's like a golden color, okay? And that'll darken that up. And I'm gonna use an artist brush to apply that to all 3 spots before I put my oil on. And that should get a much more, how shall we say, hidden look, all right? But first, finishing the sanding, 150, 220. Then I'm gonna take a lunch break, grab those supplies, and then we'll be right back to finish this off. Now it's time to slide it into place. Okay. Yeah, I'm really pleased with that. My goodness, what a look. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the wood extending past the cabinet on this side. I want to mount that, and I want to throw a couple of screws underneath. So what we're going to do is pre-drill. You should see there's like a piece of a 3/4 by 3/4 stock here. It's part of the frame. So we're going to drill through that 3/4 stock, pre-drill right into the countertop. Get a bit of a pilot hole going. And I'm going to use a 2-inch screw right into that block. There we go. It's pushing off the wall, so I'm going to hold it with my right hand, and then I'm going to back it out, and then go again. There we go. There we go. It's a nice tight fit. All right. Now, I'm going to change my bit. Back to a Robertson. I've got my leftover countertop screws here. Now I got to crawl underneath again and reattach the counter. Again, we drive it in, then we drive it out, then we drive it in again, just to make sure that we don't lift the countertop. And then add some pressure down. There we go. Whew, one of those will be enough. All right. Well, there we go. We got butcher block Waterfall. That is spectacular. Whew. Boy, Mama's gonna be happy. All right, so we're back from the store, and the goal here is to apply the stain to that circle so it matches the wood when it's got the oil on it. And so you test that with water. We're gonna do a little water test here. That's about as close as we're gonna get. And on the whiter wood, not the darker, it's even more perfect, okay? So hopefully you can see that we're gonna try to eliminate as much of the obviousness about this as we can. We're gonna open it up, I'm gonna stir it in order to mix it good. I've got an artist brush set here, and we're gonna try to use less is more, take our time. Even if it takes me 10 or 15 minutes to do these 3 circles, we wanna make sure they're perfect. Not draw attention to it. Sometimes it's these little tricks that are the difference between a good job, a bad job, or a great job, right? Here we go. So, yep, these stains you can't mix. I'm sorry, you can't shake. You got to actually stir. And as long as I've got all these thud and crud on the bottom, it's not stirred enough. All right, so you just got to go until it's nice and consistent, or you're not going to get a result that's on the label. All right, let's get on with it. We're going to start with the smallest brush I got. Okay, gives me the ability to be really exact. All right, I'm just going to stick it in there, get rid of the excess. And we're just going to draw that edge out. So we're only applying the stain to the plastic wood the best of our ability. Okay. There we go. And with any stain, you're going to want to wipe off the excess. As soon as I'm done here, we're going to do that. Oh, whoa, easy dog. Here we go. We'll do a quick blot on it. Okay. That was $9 of the stain just to get 3 dots. But in my opinion, it's worth it. Because when we're done, it'll be a lot less obvious. Hopefully. Hopefully. And we'll all be able to agree that was a good investment in time and energy. All right, guys, we're gonna just throw in a little wood glue, get this one closed up. Here. Try to keep this clean as possible. There we go. That is a nice little system. Try to prevent having too much of this glue squeeze out, right? At the same time, you want to have enough there to do the job. Yeah, I'm gonna have to crawl under here to screw this thing all together with a mending plate, so trying to be intentional and not create an environment where I start screwing and it all starts dripping in my eyes. That would not be good. There, we'll throw a little bit on this side, because that'll be a lot easier to identify where the end of that countertop is going to be. Beautiful. There we go. Let's lift her into place. It's kind of like tiling. We'll start shy, and then we'll push and squeeze. And then right back to the wall, so that we don't have a problem with the tile gap. And then just added precaution so that when I get under there, as I'm crawling under, I don't bump it by accident and open up a gap. Throw a little bit of painter's tape, which I never use when I paint. Just when I do carpentry. All right, let's go under there and finish mending all this together. Do a pre-drill and a couple of these spots here. Oh, come on. Oh, it's already stripped. So is my back. Let's go see how that looks from up top. Maybe it's good enough. Oh yeah, that's a great joint. Okay. Whew. Here we go. We're just gonna be able to sand that in. That'll be lovely. So there's a little bit of a raised edge here. You know, the countertop's probably got a bit of a curve just like the other ones. And I'm seeing a shadow, so I don't like shadows, so I'm gonna use a little bit of the plastic wood in there. Chances are by the time I'm done sanding these countertops back, the plastic wood will be all gone. But if there was enough product in there to get rid of that shadow, then it was worth using. Yeah, it's definitely just a raised edge. But hey. Yeah, I think it's pretty tight. It's just a raised edge. It'll most likely just sand all out. Let's just ounce of prevention here. There we go. Now the secret here is not to try to intentionally clean this out. The secret is to leave it rotating orbital along here until this wood gets planed down to the point where that sanding happens, okay? That is the secret. All right, that's looking really good. Okay, now what we're gonna do is just change from coarse to smooth, okay? And it's just gonna be rather quick. We're gonna take these pads interchangeable. We won't throw them out. We'll be able to use these multiple times throughout the rest of the room. Already that feels like the rest of the countertop, which is awesome. Now we're going to switch over to 150 and we're going to do a pass on the whole area, and then we'll go to the 220 and do another pass on the whole area, and then that should be done. Next step for the counters is actually to clean them because they're covered in dust. So I got a vacuum, I got two different attachments. Okay, now we are ready for our oil. All right, and we have three different application techniques available. Okay, one of them is a mini roller, sponge roller. It's a no lint roller. Most of these products nowadays have a leveling compound concept in them. All right, so you can expect that you don't have to sand in between coats. I'm still old school. I love giving a quick final sand with a steel wool 4-0 or 5-0 at the end of the day. And we're gonna see if that's necessary, depending on the technology. If I find it feels like a little bumpy, then I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with some steel wool when I'm done. But all I'm gonna do, well, open this bad boy up. All right, we're just gonna put it right into my handy dandy bucket. Here we are. Because this product also needs a little bit of a stir, a little bit of a mix, okay? And if you wanna read the instructions for installation on the back, take a picture with your phone and you can blow that up, because nobody in this world can read that the way it's printed. Osmo Top Oil, okay? It's high solids and it's made for furniture surfaces and butcher block countertops. Very important. It's a food grade safe kind of product. That'll ensure that even if you're not using, oh, that just feels amazing. Even if you're not using a chopping block, which was I recommend, or a cutting board of some sort, you know, you're not going to make yourself sick, right? That's important. Not every oil out there can be ingested, okay? Now, I'm going to use my brush to do a stir. All right. And in order to get comfortable with the product, I'm going to start in the far corner at the back. Here we go. I'm going to set it and drag it. Now, oil has an amazing ability to stretch. So see how it gets dry? We'll go back to the beginning and we'll pull the surface into the dry product. Okay? Did I grab some dirt? I don't want dirt. We'll do it again and again and again. Now everything is coated in the oil, even though I ran out halfway across. Okay? That's how you want to work. Nice and slow. Scrape off the excess or you're going to have drips and you're going to go through this product way too fast. Set your brush nice and light. You can even go backwards on the other side of the brush, but drag it and drag it and drag it until it's uniform. Okay? You'll never use too much oil that way. Now, this product should not have a problem with seams. Okay, we aren't going to get overlap problems here. It's one of the reasons I like the natural. It's kind of like set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about doing 3 inches wide for 14 feet straight. And this isn't about getting a ton of product on here. This is about getting your uniform coat, seal the wood, to prepare it for the final coat. All right? If we do a uniform coat, we won't have to go ahead and do any sanding in between these coats. But if we put too much product on here, you're going to feel it under your hand when it's dry. And you're going to be like, oh, you're going to have to sand those ridges back and clean it all up again and start all over. Just drag it and drag it and drag it until everything is uniform. You'll never have too much. This is one of these situations where less is more. The product is relatively expensive compared to the size of the can. And of course you want to do this before you cut the sink in. Or you're going to be putting your brush contrary to the grain to get it done. Right? And I know where the sink's going. I could probably avoid putting oil on everything, but I have a system here. I can do about 2 feet of countertop, 1 brush wide. So if I stay consistent with my application, then I'm not going to run into situations where I'm using too much product somewhere else. Here is an awesome opportunity to use painter's tape. Yeah. Just because oil product is not going to come off the floor as easy after the fact. Okay, so we want to give ourselves a little bit of protection here. And when you're working with oil on vertical surfaces, start from the bottom and drag it up. Okay? From bare stains. Yeah, that's almost invisible. That is much better. So I'm showing you the DIY approach to trying to hide a screw hole. Okay. And this will get even more uniform on the second coat, so I'm actually really pleased with that. All things considered. Now that 1 can of Osmo oil is now done 18 linear feet of countertop. There's 36 square feet. I'm going to tell you right now, there's enough left in this can, probably for the second coat. I'm going to go ahead and order another can just to make sure that I don't run out. But I'll keep you up to date as to whether or not we have to open that second can. It'll help you manage your expectation when you're doing your own project. Of course, we have to do all the faces. And on this waterfall, I have to do the return to the cabinet as well. So there's one final detail here to do. I think I'll probably make this work. All right, well, it's been at least 24 hours and we're back to do the second coat on the countertop. Just to get an idea, we did all the sanding first, right? So this coat came out really nice. I mean, it is smooth, right? But at the same time, it's not smooth. You can feel some texture. And I was trying to figure out a way to show you that, and I came up with this idea. I've got my microfiber cloth here, right? And on a really smooth surface, it would just float along. But check this out. You lay it down, and it's grabbing the countertop. And you can hear that, okay? Now the solution here is not to grab the orbital sander. I have 220 sandpaper, which is really rather fine. But even at the lowest setting, the orbital sander is going to literally take the oil right off the surface. And that defeats the purpose of having a first coat. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take whatever imperfections are in the odd piece of wood here, whatever microscopic dirt might be trapped in the oil, and we're going to smooth that out. So, here's what we're going to use. Steel wool, okay? But you look at the bottom of the bag, there's a lot of different ratings here. Okay, 3 is really coarse. And can you believe it or not, but in woodworking, this is really important. So I'm going to go with 00 for between coats, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand this area, and we're going to do that same test with the same cloth. And you'll be able to see the difference that it makes. Now that doesn't visually look like it's doing anything, right? Hardly making any noise. Okay, now we'll do the same cloth test. Okay, see that? We'll do one more time. I'll go nice and slow. It's barely grabbing. I think it caught something on the corner. So the point is this. I don't know if you've ever seen Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the surface of the earth. He mentioned one day that if it was like the surface of the earth is actually as smooth as a cue ball, a machined cue ball for pool, right? The bottom line is the top of the mountains and the bottom of the valleys stretched out over the whole earth. If there was like a gigantic guy in the universe who could grab the earth in his hand, he would feel like a cue ball in his hand, because there's not that much of a difference between the height and the peaks and the valleys. Well, we got a similar thing going on here. This is relatively smooth. But by taking time with the steel wool to go over the whole surface a couple of shots, we go from relatively smooth to actually having like an earth without mountains. Okay, that's really what we're trying to do here. Remember, the goal here is absolute perfection. You only get to do this once. you'll notice that there's just this little bit of ultra fine dust coming off. It's part the sanding action, it's part the decay of the steel wool. And so it actually leaves little steel dust filaments all over the place. And the next step for us, of course, is to clean all that off. So what I'm going to do is I'm using a really wrung out rag, okay? One of the things we don't want to let happen is we don't want to leave the steel there and get moisture mixed into it, because it starts to rust, and it'll actually rust in between the layers. So we're going to start off with a damp rag. We're going to clean this off. Then I'm going to come back with the dry rag after, just to make sure that all the dust is gone. All right, whew. Yeah. Grab myself another rag. Okay. And now I'm just gonna buff it. Make sure it's nice and dry. Remember, because it's covered in oil, the wood shouldn't be soaking up hardly any of that water. But just in case our sanding exposed a little bit something, we're gonna give this about 15 minutes before we put our second coat on. We'll do that same test now that we're all finished. Smooth as a baby's bum. Perfect every time. All right, so here we are. We're going to use the second half of the same can for a second coat. There we go. Next up, we're going to cut the hole in the countertop, install the sink and the faucet, and it's going to look different because I'm actually going to have the backsplash tile on before we do that. I like to do things in order of ease and comfort. So when the countertops are finished, I can do the backsplash before I cut my holes, before I stick my faucet in, because why would you want to do all that and then try to do all the tiling grout behind it if you don't have to, right? So whenever we're working, we're thinking, back of the room with your butt facing the door, working your way out, right? Or the deepest part of the project, working your way out. This is a better way to do it. That really helps keep things organized and reduces the amount of work on your punch list. Cheers to next time.